So it's a great question. And what we really want to do is take things away from just being aspirational and pilots to something that actually creates impact. And that really means not just working with the local people, but actually leveraging their knowledge, their data, their information, and localizing. So ultimately, to have a successful AI for Good project, it meant actually focusing on outcomes. So this is not about can we do a pilot, I'm not trying to do a case study. It was about really focusing on creating benefits for the Global South communities and starting small. Because what I've really learned is that local problems have global solutions. And so you look at something like Rwanda, they were spending millions of manual hours to try and categorize, classify just jobs. Because if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Well, the quicker they could do that, then the more they could look at the workforce and retraining, all these other things. And so it was a great opportunity to actually apply some AI to actually help do this documentation and classification process. Not the sexiest job in the world or sexiest project in the world, but it actually had profound benefit. Because then by doing this, they knew where the workforce was going to allocate, where jobs might be going, what kind of training programs, workforce development programs to actually create. And that's what we really want to focus on, is solving these real problems that create material impact for people. So I won't sugarcoat it. The digital divide is rapidly increasing. So the haves and have-nots, unfortunately, are the big challenges. And if I remember correctly, Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez said, I think it's 3 or 4 years ago, that after climate change, the next biggest initiative for the United Nations is actually global connectivity. Because, you think about it, we don't think about the infrastructure so much, but you need the compute power, you need the high-speed internet, you need the bandwidth, you need the resources, the talent, the data. And without that, you can't do anything. And you look at a lot of the foundational frontier models that we have, it's very English-based, which may not be that usable. And so when we think about these things, we look in 2 key areas. The first is it actually usable? Right? Building a solution that requires, high-speed internet is not going to really scale out. It's not going to be usable in a lot of these Global South communities. We have to make sure that we can do something that fits the infrastructure. The second is, how do we actually build capacity? So a lot of, unfortunately, nonprofits and NGOs that I work with, their initial thoughts are kind of like, you need to do AI charity. The real truth is the Global South needs AI capacity. How can we actually help build this infrastructure out for them? How can we provide the training, like through our AI's Skills Coalition? How can we get the data, the resources, the compute into their hands so they can actually operationalize these things themselves? That's a complex rollout, I'll say, because we have a lot of focus groups, study groups, working groups. In the standards organization, there's a lot of work on this because, let's be honest, governance without standards is just a speech. And policy tells us kind of what society is looking for, but standards tell engineers what to build. And I think that's what we're really realizing, is that things are moving so quickly right now that our old processes and our old frameworks can't keep up with that. We have to get at being anticipating what's going to happen, not reacting. How much time do we have? Because there's a lot to unpack. I'll be brutally honest with a couple of these things. We can never fully strip out bias. We want to try and minimize it. We think that's a big acceptance. Otherwise, we were just going to keep getting diminishing returns. And the reason I say that, with bias particularly, is we don't program AI, we teach it. And it needs training data, and all data is biased. It needs human teachers, and we're biased. It's that, especially implicit or unconscious bias, that's a killer. And so we think about, how do we balance some of these things out? We have to think, what I call the new triple constraints, which is accuracy, cost, speed. And I think one of the big challenges initially with AI, and we've seen this evolve with AI for good, is when we first started this like 10 years ago, there was a lot of hesitation, right? Like, what is AI? Is it going to be Skynet? And AI going to rise up and take over the world? So, so a little more education about what is AI. And then kind of got into like, well, what's going to happen over here? What can it do? What can it not do? And then it became about it's going to take our jobs, right? And then we hit an inflection point about maybe 2 years ago when everyone started realizing that they're behind. They're behind the AI race. So you had the FOMO, fear of missing out. And so everyone was trying to run as fast as possible. And everyone was trying to recoup their, investments and think about ROI. And that got us into trouble. So I'm seeing, unfortunately, organizations as a result, the more you try to do, more hallucinations you get. The more you try to do, the more compute costs you have. And so we need regulation and standards. So we need to that through the lens of how do we balance out the triple constraints of accuracy, cost, and speed. And that will help kind of level set then regulation versus innovation.